guys, Ashley French here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to install floor to ceiling board and batten. It's one of my favorite accent walls, and this is a full tutorial, so I'm going to show you how to do it from start to finish. I've also included the list of my tools and materials in the description below, so let's get started. For this project, I am using 1 inch by 6 inch pine boards in an 8-foot length for my vertical boards and a 12-foot length for my 2 horizontal boards. You can find these at your hardware store in the trim and baseboard aisle. The tools I will be using are my miter saw, brad nailer, 2-inch brad nails, measuring tape, level, stud finder, and pencil. To determine the spacing of my boards, I first measured the full width and height of my wall. Then I went to inchcalculator.com, clicked construction calculators at the top, and scrolled down and clicked on wainscoting calculators. I put in the width of my wall and made sure to change the setting to inches. Then I put in the width of my stiles, which are my vertical boards. Make sure you actually measure them. A 6-inch board, for example, is actually only 5.5 inches wide. Then the number of panels are the number of gaps you will have. This number will depend on the width of your wall and how wide or narrow you want your spacing. I suggest putting in different numbers, pressing calculate, look at the rendering, and pick a number of panels that gives you the look you are going for. For me, 5 panels looked great. Once I clicked calculate, the rendering gave me the exact spacing between my boards. This is really the only number I am looking for, and this is the measurement I am going to use to make my spacer board. My spacer board happened to be 17 7/8 inch. Yours will most likely be totally different. I measured, marked, and cut my board. I then double checked the measurement to make sure it was exact, and then I wrote my measurement on it so I would know it was my spacer board. Before getting started, I used my stud finder to find the studs and then marked them with a piece of painter's tape. You will try to aim for a stud when possible when nailing up your boards. Now, the very first board that I measured and cut was going to be the very top horizontal board that would go up on the wall at the top against the ceiling. I used a ladder and I pushed my board into place, making sure it was pushed all the way up against the ceiling. Then I nailed it into place, lining up my nails with the studs that I had marked on the wall. Now, to determine the spacing for the second horizontal board, I wanted to hold up a scrap piece and visually determine what size gap I wanted here. So this is going to be a personal preference. Once I got the board where I liked it, I marked the bottom of the board with my pencil. Then I took a measurement from the top of my baseboard up to my pencil mark to determine what length my vertical boards would be. This length ended up being 64 inches, so that would be the length of my vertical boards. My ceilings are 8 foot tall, just for reference. I measured my board to 64 inches, marked it, and then cut it. I brought this board in and lined it up on the farthest left side of the wall, which happened to be a corner for me. I made sure my board was perfectly flush with the corner and was not hanging over at all. Then I put 2 nails in the bottom. I double checked it to make sure it was still flush with the corner, and then I put the rest of the nails in. Then I nailed in the farthest right board, also making sure it was pushed up flush with the corner of the adjoining wall. Now it's time to put the second horizontal board on top of these 2 vertical boards. I checked that the left side was perfectly flush with the corner and not hanging over, and that the right side was pushed all the way against the corner of the adjoining wall. Then I put my long level on top to see if the board was level. Because many walls and floors are not perfectly straight and plumb, there is a chance that your board may not be level. For me, the right side of the horizontal board needed to come up a little to make it level. So I nailed in the left side first, then I came over to the right side to adjust it to make it level. I had to lift the board slightly on the right side to make it level, and then I nailed in the right side and the rest of the board into place. It is okay if you have a small gap between the boards like this. You can fill this in with spackle. But if it's any bigger than 1/4 of an inch, I do recommend cutting a taller vertical board. Now it's time to install the vertical boards. I like to measure them as I go and not assume they are all the same size, since again, your floors or baseboards may be uneven. I get the measurement, cut my board, and install the board using my spacer I created to get the perfect gap. I nail the bottom, then move the spacer to the top and nail the top and the rest of the board. Since you won't be able to hit a stud for every board, I want to show you the X nail method you should use. So here is a board and a piece of drywall, for example. You want to aim your first nail in a downward direction and then aim your next nail in an upward direction. This creates the X pattern and hugs the board into the drywall, making it very difficult to pull the board off the wall. So using the X nail method, I continued to measure, cut, and install each board. I do like to use my level as I go to make sure the boards are staying level. I use this same method again for the top vertical boards. I measure each as I go, mark the measurement on my board, and cut. For this first board, I made sure it was flush to my corner and not hanging over, and then I nailed it into place. I then used my spacer and continued to work my way toward the right side of the wall. I wanted to show you this odd corner that I had at the end. More than likely, this won't be the case for you. I just measured the door trim that was in the way, and then I used my saw to cut it out of my board, and then I nailed this unique piece into place. I am using Drydex spackle to fill the nail holes and seams between the boards. I just use my finger to apply it. I like this spackle because it goes on pink and turns white when it is dry. Once the spackle is fully dry, I use my 220 grit sanding block to sand down the spackle so it is smooth and flush with the boards. Next, I use Alex Flex crown molding caulk to fill the seams between the boards and the wall. I use my caulk gun to apply it and then use my finger to smooth it out and then wipe my finger off as I go. If you have a board on the corner that doesn't meet another wall like I did, there will be a small gap that you will see that looks like this. Just use your caulk and run a bead along the seam and then smooth it in with your finger. Because my two horizontal boards were not primed, I added a coat of primer to them. If your boards are already primed, you can skip this step, but if not, I highly recommend priming them first. Once the primer was dry, I painted the whole wall with a fresh coat of paint, and then your tall board and batten accent wall is done. All right, so there you have it. I hope this video was helpful. I will be listing all of the materials and the tools I used in the description below, so check that out. If you guys have questions, just leave them in the comments and I will answer those for you. Now, if you're looking for a tutorial on just normal board and batten that only goes up about 2/3 up the wall, that video is already on my profile, so check it out. And be sure to subscribe because this is only one of 5 accent wall video tutorials that I'll be uploading to my channel this month, so be sure to check all of those out. Bye guys.